Hello everyone. This section is from Unit 1.4. I know this is slightly improperly labeled. This is Unit 1.4, Day 1. Day 1 in Mrs. Crawford's class, at least. And we're talking about corresponding parts of congruent figures today. So remember, if you think back to when we talked about corresponding angles, we kind of thought of the word matching. So we kind of have our tables set up in groups in our classroom. So think about if you're in the bottom right-hand corner of your group, you're in the corresponding spot to somebody else who's also in the bottom right-hand corner of their group. You're all in kind of matching spots, even though you're in different groups. That's what corresponding means. It means matching pieces of different groups or different figures or different something, but still in the same spot. So remember, congruent means equal or exactly the same. So in order to match the parts of the different figures, they have to be basically copies of one another. Otherwise, we don't have equal parts to correspond with. So we're going to talk today about what makes something congruent, first of all. How do I know if it's actually congruent or not? And how to tell which pieces of the shape match with which other pieces. So a couple definitions here. First of all, congruent polygons. Polygons is just a name for a many-sided figure. So we have triangles, squares, pentagons, all those kind of fall under polygons, many-sided. And they have to be exactly the same shape and size to be congruent. So that means all the angles must be the same and all the sides must be the same. Corresponding parts are the angles and sides that are congruent in two polygons. So they're the ones that are equal in both pieces or both figures. So make sure you print or pause there and get that copied down. In class, we did a little activity matching up which set of shapes goes into which category. Hopefully you can kind of visually tell where these might go, but I do want to talk about them real briefly. If we look at this guy over here, we've got similar sizes, but they're two different shapes. One of them's kind of like a thought bubble, one of them's a talk bubble, so that's definitely not congruent. If I look at these, one of them is rotated, but that doesn't mean that they're not congruent. So think back to our transformations unit. We talked about translations, reflections, rotations. Those are all rigid movements. Even though it changes the way the figure is turned or flipped or whatever, it's still the same shape. So those are congruent even if they're not facing the exact same way. Looking at the circles here, they're the same shape, they're both circles, but they're two different sizes, so they're not congruent. This one's kind of tricky to tell. You might have to almost turn your head a little bit to see, but they are actually the same exact shape and size. It's just that one is rotated about, let's say 90 degrees or so to one side, but they are still congruent. Oops, there we go. If we look at our green ovals, we have one that's really, really stretched out and one that's kind of short and stout. They're both ovals, but definitely different sizes, so they are not congruent. And then again, we've got two triangles. One's rotated or reflected, if you want to call it like that. But either way, they are congruent because they're the same shape and size, just facing different ways. So let's dig into our notes a little bit with some examples. Oops, don't need that. So for this first one, we're going to work on just matching based on the picture. So all these little tick marks here on the sides represent what sides should match with which sides. These arches that are in the angles also tell us what angles should match with what angles. Now, what you have to really be careful of is make sure that you match the correct letter and that you put the appropriate symbol with it. So this little, almost like a half triangle in front, that's the symbol that means angle. So anytime you're writing an angle, you have to put that symbol there. If you don't, you're simply referring to the point, not the angle itself. And that seems kind of picky, but you really do need to put it because it's kind of like putting a title. If you don't put the correct title, you're not really referring to the right piece of the puzzle. So if I look at angle A, there's two arches in there. If I look at my other triangle, the other angle that's got two arches is H. So angle A is congruent to angle H, just like that. If I do the same thing with B, this one has one arch, and J has one arch. That means that they are congruent to each other. So it's congruent. This is the symbol for congruent, by the way. This equal sign with a little kind of swirl on top. And then last one, we have triple arches for C and triple arches for K. So this would be the appropriate way to name off all of the angles being congruent to each other. You also do have to work with the sides as well. I like to color code mine and go through one at a time so I make sure I don't miss any. So AB, notice it's got this bar on top. You have to put that there if you're talking about a side. So please be aware of that. Again, the congruent symbol's in the middle. AB is from here to here. And then we've got this tick mark in the middle. The side that matches that, that's got the same tick mark, is over here, HJ. And then again, it's got the one tick mark. So AB is congruent to HJ, just like that. And it is HJ because A matches with H. Remember our letters up here. And B matches with J, so I do need to put it in that order. We've also got BC. That one's got two tick marks in the side. And on this other triangle, KJ has two tick marks. So I'd say that those two are congruent. And let's go with yellow. And then we've got triple tick marks here and triple tick marks here, which means that CA is congruent to KH. And here's the thing, if I flip any of these, it's still okay. Preferably, you want to put the proper matchup. So I'll go through and show you which one that would be. Or JH. So A goes with H, it says. So H should be the one that comes first. So this one's the proper one. B is supposed to match up with J. So really this one is the one that's the preferred one. And then C is supposed to go with K. So that should both be first. So really, oops, that one's supposed to be yellow, but really that one should be the first one. Again, these other options are okay for the sides, but you really do want to try and be as specific as possible and name them in the proper order. And the reason for that is because of this guy right here. When you name the actual shape, you have to put them in the correct order. That part is especially important. It's kind of like the code that determines what order all the rest of the letters should go in, and it kind of sets up the communication about the shapes. It tells you what letters should match with what for the entire figure, so that's why it's kind of important. So if A is first, H should be first. So triangle, oopsies, this thing is so touchy with that. HB should match with J, and C should match with K. So triangle HJK. All right, please pause here and do example 2 on your own. See if you can come up with all of the angles that are supposed to go together and all of the sides that are supposed to go together. Please try it on your own. See if you can do it properly, because on the quiz you have to be able to name them and match them on your own. So take time, because you won't get full credit if you don't match them properly. Take a couple seconds, see if you can do it, and then I'll show you what the actual answers should be. You can check your work here. If you didn't write it with the correct symbols, you wouldn't get full credit. Angle F, this one has 3, this one has 3. So angle R is congruent to angle E. And then we've got 4 and 4 here. So angle S is congruent to angle D. Sides, we've got PQ. P goes with G, Q goes with F, got QR. So that's the same as FE. I'm kind of using the angle arches to help me pick out which ones match up with which one. With FE. Make sure I put it in the correct order. And then we've got RS. So that's from E to D now. So RS is congruent to ED. Notice I've got bars over all the top of my sides. Gotta name it properly. And then we have SP and DG. Okay, so there's that one. All right, so this one, now we're throwing in a little bit of algebra here. First of all, let's match up our sides. This description right here tells us everything we need to know about what should go with what. So looking at your letters, A is the first one, D is the first one, so A is supposed to match with D. B and F are second, so they match. And then C and E are third, so they match as well. So that kind of gives me the blueprint for the rest of the picture and tells me what should go with what. Now, if I look at my picture, I'm trying to solve for X and Y. I've got 8y minus 5 at angle F, and I've got 2y plus X on side FE. So I'm going to have to figure out what those pieces of the puzzle match with in the other triangle in order to set them equal to something. I know I can't deal with this one yet because it's got two variables. I can't do something that's got a y and an x there, so let's tackle the thing that's just 8y minus 5 first. Now remember, that's what FE equals. Okay, well let's look at the top triangle. What does angle F match with in the top triangle? Check my chart. F is equal to B, which means angle F should be equal to B up here, which is actually 99. Really what that means is that 8y minus 5 has to equal 99. Little algebra, hopefully easy algebra. And we get that y is equal to 13, okay? In order to solve this side, we need to plug 13 in for y. So instead of 2 times y, it's really 2 times 13 plus x, which is the same as 26 plus x, okay? And if I look at the top part, side FE should match with BC right here. So 26 plus x is equal to 38.4. Do quick algebra there, and I get that x is actually 12.4. So those are my two answers for that one. The last piece I need to talk about really quickly is this third angles theorem. Basically what this is saying is if I know that two angles are equal in two triangles, like B and J are equal and K and C are equal, that automatically means that these third ones have to be equal to each other because all angles in a triangle have to add up to 180 degrees. Okay, so if I know two of them, automatically the third one has to be the same. That's basically what third angle theorem means. You can ignore this picture down here. Okay, so I'm going to do one of the examples with you really quick. You'll have to do the remainder. If I look at my first picture, it's got angle L and angle Z as equal to each other. They're both 70. I've got these boxes here that mean 90 each. Okay, well, this whole thing has to add up to 180. So 90 plus 70 gives me 160 here. If I know I got to make 180, that must mean that angle M is 20 degrees. Well, I learned by third angles theorem that if I know that two of the angles are the same, so this 90, 90, the 70, 70, the third ones automatically have to be equal to each other. So just by that, I figure out that x is 20. Same kind of principle here, okay? Figure out what c equals, because that's going to tell you what you have to set 5x equal to. Check with your teacher for